All right, we'll call the regular meeting of November 3rd, 2009 to order. Mr. Lucky, you want to lead us in the flag salute, please?
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Garber, do you have anything to report coming out of closed session?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll ask the board to join me up front for a service award. We have one today.
Mr. President, members of the board, members of the public, we have one service award, and a very special service award. This certificate of recognition and pin and service pin replica of the district emblem are presented to Laura Terry for 30 years of loyal and faithful service to the Imperial Irrigation District. And
Okay, we'll be open for public comments. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
Hello, my name is Tom Webster, and I am the Director of Strategic Sourcing of Energy for Hilton Worldwide, and I'm honored to be here today, specifically to represent the La Quinta Resort in La Quinta, California. I just want to say that that property is a property that wants to partner with the Imperial Irrigation District. We're open to looking at ways in which we can develop win-win situations, which will allow, obviously, you to save your cost and for us to save money or keep our energy costs at a reasonable level. I've met some of your staff, and we're eager to explore opportunities such as demand-side management, aggregation of meters, anything that really makes sense, we're open to explore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Adajam, will you get with this gentleman and exchange cards? Or? Thank you, Mr. Webster. Any other public comments? Okay, we'll move to board comments. We'll start on the left side this time.
Thank you, President Hanks. I'll just remind everybody that tomorrow at 11 a.m. is the grand opening for the Managed Marsh up on Highway 111 north of Calipat. And then also I know that they advertise in the paper the Law of the River workshop on Thursday from 10 to 2 at the Condit Auditorium by Bill Swan. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Director Mendoza.
No, just want to remind you all that this afternoon at 5 o'clock, we're going to hold a public hearing for the energy cost adjustment, and I expect this room to be full of folks from this area.
No comment.
No comments here. General Manager Brady, do you have any comments?
just two. As I previously mentioned to the board, that myself and staff and some of our bond counsel were up yesterday in Sacramento talking to the iBank staff regarding the proposed loan guarantee on our next water financing. We do have several points of disagreement on that, but we're working through that. That's going to be probably another 2-week process before we come to some resolution. And of course, we'll be reporting that to the board at that time. Secondly, just to let the board know, we're kicking off our internal United Way campaign next week. The staff here at La Quinta and in Imperial have developed internal video that I'm very pleased. I just previewed it, and I think it's excellent tool for the campaign. So look forward to great results on United Way.
Okay. Mr. Garber?
No comments, sir.
Okay, we'll move on to information agenda, administrative services. Mr. Campbell?
We'd like to present to the board for information a draft version of the policy that establishes guidelines for acquisitions of goods and services. This would supersede the current governing document, which is Resolution 11-2001, which was adopted in May 22nd, 2001. This has been a lengthy process, probably 8 to 9 months in the making, and hopefully works to clarify how we will manage awards, identifies authorization levels, the definitions for procurement of services, clarification on local vendors and criteria for looking at bids and how they would be awarded, exceptions to competition, limits on competition, particularly sole source and sole brand. Sole brand being a new concept versus just sole sourcing. Sole brand would be an example of that would be where GE is the manufacturer of specific equipment in a generation facility. It's not likely that we're going to go out and sole source, or they'd be the sole brand, and rather than doing competitive bid for acquiring additional components or work on that, we would sole brand with the manufacturer. Identifies and clarifies emergency transactions, and some lengthy information there regarding the amendments to goods and services contracts. Adds a component for audit, and a piece that hadn't been in the document before was enforcement, which provides the teeth to make sure that people are abiding by the policy. I open it up for questions, and
I have a
hopefully
question,
we'll be
Mr.
responding.
Campbell.
Yes.
On page 5 on C, local vendors, describe local vendors. What is it Imperial Valley, Coachella Valley?
Local vendors, actually, we have in the section 4 under definitions, we have a definition for local vendor. And we're saying responsible vendors located in the service area of the IID who maintain a full-time permanent business in their company name and who have established electrical power and or irrigation water accounts with the IID in the company name.
Okay. Do you have the original version of this policy? Because I don't see, this is the new version. Do you have the previous-
resolution? No, I
Or do you, it would have been, it's helpful if you would include that so I could compare one
If
to
you
the
could-
other.
You're
If you
right.
could send that to us so we could
Absolutely.
compare, okay.
It's a 3-page document. Not a lot of material, but absolutely we'll get that to you and have that sent
I
to you.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Will all these goods and services also identify which MWA or project that they're attached to or being subscribed for? And that in here? It'll identify.
Well, that would be in the MWA policy, and specifics on the funding and the requirements for that. There is again, part of what we were doing is stripping away all the practices and procedures out of the policy, and that needs to be put together in SOPs And as defined in this policy, the purchasing agent would be the one responsible for developing those policies, or not the policies, but the practices and the SOPs. And yes, that should be included in there in terms of for a service agreement. Again, there's the authorization sheets that are required, and how the authorization from the management perspective and from the CFO's office in terms of where the funding mechanism is, how they're paying for the services or the goods. And I believe that Betty had a comment on a section, and
I also noticed that you added Part I enforcement. That's something new to policies, right?
yes, per our conversation with both you and Director Abadi, the one thing that in our reviews, what was missing was where's the teeth in the policy, and so. Yes, as we look through more and more policies, the board should expect that we'll be bringing and including an enforcement component. This one is lifted from the compliance policy that we put together and brought to the board earlier, actually last year. And again, it's we need to make sure that we start putting the teeth into these things.
All right, thank you. Ms. Betty?
No, yes, good afternoon. As Mr. Campbell mentioned earlier, it was about an 8-month and probably about 8 or 9 versions of this policy. We did received updates as they were working on the policy, and compared to our recommendation that we made during the years, last year, year before. And most of them are, or actually I should say probably all of them are implemented as soon as the standard operating procedure that he just mentioned, the SOP, will be developed. It's page 5 on the very top for emergency transaction, and the very first paragraph reads that consulting services contracts may commence with the purchasing agent's approval, even if the dollar amount exceeds allowable limits and before formal approval is acquired. From the general manager and or the board, depending on the amount. I have 2 observations, suggestions, whatever would be the pleasure of the board and management. The purchasing agent in this case is made the responsible person for doing such acquisitions in emergency. We would suggest maybe changing the purchasing agent to the general manager, and also if already the service or the material was purchased. So we have it. We have either it's a contract, either it's material we already bought. So I don't see why we're bringing it back for approval. It's an emergency. It should be probably brought back to the board for information, to inform the board, this is what happened, this is what we did. But the action is already taken, so how are you going to approve something that action has already been taken on? So that's my suggestion. Instead of saying for board or general manager approval, is for information.
Or for ratification.
For ratification, whatever it might be. But it's action is already taken, so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And other than that, everything looks good.
We have consensus of the board to have that put in.
Yeah, bring it back for the next meeting, the 17th.
I do want to thank Audit for their participation, and special mention to Director Abadi and Director Hanks for their participation and review of this over multiple meetings. Hopefully we have a document that will serve the district well.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Just another thing, just keep
Yes.
in mind, also on page 5, we have policy and procedure 1080 that will be coming to the board for approval. So it's going to be, that policy and procedure has to be approved because this is referenced in this policy.
Okay, yeah, that's tied in with policy 1080
Yeah.
under G. Okay, all right. So we'll make sure that's synchronized. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 2, energy. request by Director Abadi for update on the following. The Energy Balancing Authority White Paper, Western Area Power Authority filings and tracking, and transmission planning.
I've been requested to answer some of Director Abadi's questions concerning the Energy Balancing Authority White Paper, the tracking of WAPA, or Western Area Power Authority, filings and tracking, and what we're doing on transmission planning. Now, we received from Z Global the Energy Balancing Authority white paper last night. We've just had a very brief chance to review it. In summary, the white paper recommends that we retain our balancing authority position and not join the Cal ISO. While it identifies several benefits, the primary benefit is the ability to purchase energy through the day-ahead and real-time markets of the Cal ISO, which we can also accomplish through expansion, the planned expansion of our real-time and pre-scheduling desk. But we'd like to defer that for roughly a week to go through it in great detail and then come back to the board with the final paper once we've had a chance to review it with Z Global.
Will the board also have a chance to review that paper before it's discussed in a future meeting?
And I think it would be helpful to staff to be able to give you a similar updated briefing so that we could go into it in some detail. I'm not thinking a week from now, frankly, because I think it's going to take a couple of 3 weeks to set that up and schedule it. But before that happens, we can get you copies of that briefing paper from Z Global, as well as our own comments on it. We think generally they're on target, but we think there's some other reasons why we think that maintaining our own balancing authority it gives us a stronger hand. But there are issues. There's a proposed 500 kV lines crisscrossing our district. On the other hand, we're talking about internally about developing a second open season path, which we've had such success with the first offer that the second one is becoming obvious to us that would be very viable. The developers want to work with us because we have the rights of ways. We have local control, and we can bring transmission to the market quicker than anyone else. And this is a way to do it without putting up our own capital, using developer capital. So all said, there's so much going on. I think that it's worthy of a full hour, or at least, of briefing you and making sure you're fully aware of everything that's happening and ensuring that we're doing following the policies that you establish in terms of our transmission strategy.
Did you go? Oh, I was just looking for a pointer.
He's lost without his chalkboard.
It's difficult to look at a big map like this and say that little place down there in the corner without a little red dot that you can follow. The second question that the director had, Western Area Power Authority filings and tracking. We're working closely with Western, particularly on one of the proposed, or two of the proposed 500 lines that Western is studying crisscrossing our district that Mr. Ajayan referred to. We'd prefer to include that in the briefing that we have just as we lay out our long-term plans. The third issue on transmission planning, we're a participant in a number of different forums in the Southwest and the Western Interconnect area. In California, IID is a participant in the Renewable Energy Transmission Project, which essentially goes from the Coachella Valley substation up in the upper left-hand corner up into the Mirage Devers 2 substation. That is part of, whether you call it Green Path or whether you continue coming all the way down to Bannister, one of the projects that is proposed out there. Then you have the new California Transmission Planning Group, which is represented in the executive committee by Mr. Brady and Mr. Steve Keene, and on the technical side by David Barajas and myself. Then we're part of the Integrated Energy Policy Report through the California Energy Commission, and we're now participating at the Cal ISO planning issues. Now, the first of these is going back to the READY, Renewable Energy Transmission Initiative. The READY project was done in 3 phases. The first phase was to identify competitive renewable energy zones, or what we call CREZs. CREZ, or what they call a CREZ. A CREZ, essentially all of the southern part of the Salton Sea is the renewable energy sources, and then to the south and east of the Salton Sea as potential solar sources. So we are, depending upon which value you're looking at, either the first or second area in terms of renewable energy in the state. So everybody would like to get down here. The second part of READY, once you have identified the CREZs, is how to get them to market. And so the READY process identified a number of what we call foundation lines, were large interstate, intrastate transmission lines going north and south, essentially connecting Southern California with Northern California. And again, it depends upon which of these versions we're looking at, whether it follows the L line, which is the line furthest on the east that you see there, interconnecting essentially Bannister with Avenue 58. Whether you're talking about converting that into a 500 line, or whether you're coming down on the east side of the Salton Sea. There's been different proposals going back and forth on how to create one of these lines that would interconnect back into another line that moved the power all the way through California. Okay. The next issue were the California Transmission Planning Group. This came out of a issue that was raised by IID and others, that there's a lack of regional transmission planning, that we can't keep up with all the various, and I say we, all entities cannot keep up with every independent developer, every utility, every independent group that comes through and proposes a new transmission line. So the California Transmission Planning Group was an attempt at a regional joint planning entity made up of the balancing authorities here in California. So the 3 investor-owned utilities, ourselves, the Cal ISO, I'm missing and SMUD, and Los Angeles. Thank you. I was missing 2, not 1.
Dr. Cook, with that regional planning, are they thinking about any new hubs, creating any new hubs in that effort?
Whether it's the California Transmission Planning Group looking at Devers 2, or Mirage is a new hub, but the real hub that everybody is looking for is our Midway substation. Okay, that's ultimately where everybody would like to be, as a way of getting into our system and getting access to the geothermal and solar resources that can be accessed there.
Are there any plans or any proposals for our San Felipe sub that's out a little bit out west of Bannister?
That would have to be on one of the READY programs. I'm not aware of it. Okay, but there's been a number of proposals on the way that you can come down with. Edison would very much like to get from Devers to Midway to IV, or Devers to the Bannister new substation into IV. So they don't particularly have a great care of whether they come east or west of the Salton Sea, just so long as they can interconnect all the way down from Devers to IV as a Cal ISO controlled line, which then allows them to, in one sense, bypass some of the district's existing collector system, or the system that is collecting the geothermal and solar resources and then getting them to a line that will get them out of our service territory. So looking at which of the different proposals, and I'm not trying to be confusing about this, it really depends on which day we're talking about, how the lines are being proposed. They're coming in so quickly that there are different proposals from different entities, some of them trying to get down to just San Diego so they can feed in the IV sub and deliver it to SDG&E. Some of them trying to get north so they can deliver to Edison and further north. And some of them trying to get to Mirage, or further north of Mirage up into the Hesperia, Victorville area, so they can deliver to Los Angeles. So different days, different proposals, but quite a few that are going on. There is a need for another line north-south exiting our system to meet the resources that we are not going to satisfy through our Path 42 upgrades. 1,000, 1,200 megawatts of export capacity. But that still leaves, over the next 5 or 6 years after that, somewhere in the order of 3,000 to 5,000 megawatts that are here in the district's control area that would like to be developed, but which none of our published plans show any way for these entities to export their power long term. Was that a long-winded answer to your question, sir?
I have a question about, I know Director Abadi asked about the San Felipe hub, and I know that was, are you concerned that somebody's going to run a new line in here and try to bypass us like SDG&E tried to do when they were going north into the geothermal and going out San Felipe? Is that what you're concerned about?
No, they were going west across that Narrows. No, it was
Yeah, but they were going
to
to come up and then go out, get into our geothermal field is what.
Right, because I know there was an area out there that there was a resource area out there. I don't know, sure what happened out there in the Truck Haven area. But I see most of the requests coming from the north. I just thought, I know the Bannister Midway L line and stuff is part of that. I think our original thoughts on the Midway Bannister upgrade, but I didn't know if the Bannister or the San Felipe would be better. Just like I don't understand why WAPA would want to come from Blythe all the way into Knob and not go to the hub that's already in Palo Verde at a shorter distance.
Well, the western proposal, which is currently being studied, goes from, it's essentially the west of the river upgrades from Blythe to Knob, or Knob to Midway to Devers. So in their case, what they're looking at, and this is a proposal that's also being studied through with a number of Arizona utilities and Citizens Power, extends the
Excuse
west.
me, Dr. Cook. Citizens, you're talking about Joe Kennedy's
The very same.
group?
Yes, ma'am.
He hasn't gone away, has he?
No, ma'am.
He's back.
He's never left.
He's in, so who's he working with now?
Citizens.
Citizens, and they have a partnership with whom? Whom are they dealing with right now?
Who's working with SDG&E?
SDG&E?
Supposed to build a
we
line
can-
from
we
IV
can-
sub over to the Imperial County line.
We can get into what they're doing on in the south. On the new line, they've just recently agreed to finance half of SDG&E's cost of the new line in
80
exchange
million or something like that?
It's more than that, I believe. But in exchange for that, they would then have half the capacity on the line, and they've applied to FERC for transmission owner recovery of the investment in the line.
So they're supposedly a nonprofit, so they want the ratepayers to pay for their investment?
They would want the users of the line to pay
The
so that they
ratepayers.
can, well, the ratepayers of the Cal ISO.
The Cal ISO, yeah, to pay for
So
their
that they
investment.
could turn around and use the profits as part of their charitable activities.
You say that with a straight face.
Yes, ma'am. But they are part of the consortium that's studying North Gila, Knob, Midway, Devers, and then another link between Midway and IV. Okay, and that one we've been opposing because they would prefer to build a second Midway substation that would allow them to bypass our MW lines that we use to collect all the geothermal resources to feed into our transmission lines north and south, the KNKS. So we're somewhat opposed to that idea.
Do we have a better plan then we're going to come up with?
I'd prefer to tell you that in
That's
a
fine.
few weeks.
We'll give you a full briefing on those. There's more than one competing proposal for running 500 kV lines down here. And we're aware of all of them, or aware of most of them right now. There'll be more. And I think we can give you a full briefing on what our strategy is and what we've done to date.
Next is what's going on at FERC and the Department of Energy. Essentially, the Cal ISO is looking at our transmission system with their rules and regulations and attempting to bring at least some portion of our activities under their rules. Oh, good. Oh, I'm zooting myself.
One of those pens we give out, I think,
Yeah, I got it.
with our name on it.
Don't
No,
hang
I
them
was shooting
again.
myself. I'm pointing like this. Making it nice. All right, going back then, the western proposal would come from either North Gila Knob up to Midway and then up into the Devers for Devers 2 area. Or the new Midway 2 sub. Now, we would obviously not allow a new line to come in to Midway and then interconnect with our MW 1, 2, 3, and 4 lines, which are our connectors with the existing geothermals. So they have proposed building another substation right next to this, as with this. And so both of those are attractive, particularly to the extent that we upgraded the 500 line between Coachella Valley and Devers. We're brought a 500 line in here as part of the Path 42 upgrades. Now, the Cal ISO is complaining that here at Devers and our other interconnections with them, the Cal ISO has adopted a marginal cost pricing structure and is attempting to force us to use their losses, loss calculations as a way of being consistent with the way that they establish prices within their control area. We see no reason that we should do what the Cal ISO would like us to do.
Can they force us to do that?
There's an ongoing court case on that. We'll find out. At this point, we are challenging some of the things that they've proposed. Essentially, they want real-time information on our scheduling on a timely basis. I don't think we have to give it to them. I say real time. They want to know which resources we scheduled hour by hour so they can calculate what the cost of energy at IV and Devers was.
Tell them it's none of their damn business.
I'm sure the courts would like to hear that. So the briefs were filed. FERC did accept most of their proposal, but not all of it. So the briefs were filed. Is Debbie handling that, or Debbie Swanstrom, our FERC attorney, is handling that right now?
Okay.
There's also another proceeding going on, the Cal ISO's adjacent balancing authority issue, that since we're a balancing authority adjacent to the Cal ISO, again, they would like to see how we're actually dispatching and the cost of our energy as a way of calculating their locational marginal price of energy on a real-time basis. Again, we don't have to provide it to them on a real-time basis, but we have to provide it to them so they can calculate their LMP for their people. Again, we're challenging the FERC order on this, along with SMUD, Turlock, and some other entities. In other words, it's a national corridor that is supposedly determined to make life easy for bringing power in, that encompasses everything from Phoenix this way. Okay, so if you're anywhere in that, you're part of a national corridor. But if it's so big, it means absolutely nothing. But they have issued it. Okay. The Citizens Energy proceeding. Citizens, well, this is what we were talking about earlier. Citizens has entered into an agreement, potential agreement with SDG&E on the power link, trying to recover its cost of capital. I have no idea how that's going to work. It's an SDG&E, Cal ISO, citizens issue. They're doing it. Probably the only thing that we object to is the use of our name. And so, now those are the basic. There's some open access proceedings also, but those are the basic issues that we're covering right now in this. As I said, we are covering these various forms in great detail. It's taking up essentially all of Mr. Keene and Mr. Brahas's time, going from meeting to meeting to meeting. Mr. Keene could not be here today because of a ready board meeting, I believe, or a ready executive committee meeting. Otherwise, he would have been presenting this issue to you.
I want to thank you, Dr. Cloak, for your information. It seems to me that you all are right on top of things, and I appreciate that. But I'm looking forward to the follow-up discussion in a couple of weeks.
The last thing that Director Abadi requested was on transmission planning, and again, I would prefer to defer that until for a couple of weeks.
Okay. I know Director Mendoza and I meet with you and Mr. Jan on a strategic basis. I want what you can share board with the rest of the board and the public. So I'm sure we'll be waiting for that.
The next briefing that we have will be covering that issue along with the integrated resource plan.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to number 3, review of the photovoltaic rebate.
David?
Good afternoon, directors. A few weeks ago, I made some administrative changes to our solar photovoltaic rebate proposal. One of these changes was that any potential rebate over $200,000 should come back to the board for approval, and this is the first step, the information item. Jewel Ranch, Howard Margulies, has requested a rebate for $2.80 per kW per watt for essentially a 680 kW system. As part of the proposed changes, we are reducing the amount from roughly 1.7 million to a maximum of 300 kW or $840,000. It's a straightforward solar photovoltaic system. They intend to have it done by December 31st of this year, trying to take advantage of the $2.80 per watt rebate as opposed to the $2.60 per watt rebate, or that 20 cents would make roughly a $60,000 difference. They will meet all the obligations of our SB1 program.
Dr. Cloak, if I remember correctly, we had talked about limiting the award between $200,000, $300,000 per project. That way they would be, we could probably reach out to more of our ratepayers.
Right now, it is 400 kW at roughly $2.80 per public and nonprofit organizations, so that would be $1.1 million. For private, $840,000, and for residential, 15 kW, so about $40,000. That's not the exact number, but approximately.
Can I mention something? As of a year ago, there really wasn't a limit. Now, you may recall that we gave out a grant, a rebate to a customer casino that had a 1 megawatt installation for $2.6 million. I think in November of last year, you made, actually it was February of this year, you made changes to that program, limiting it to a maximum of half a megawatt, which would cut that amount.
Director Abadi gave me the presentation. Yeah, so, okay.
And the changes that Dr. Coco is recommending would further reduce that maximum. At the time you made the changes to from a 1 megawatt to a half megawatt, I think that you also enacted a policy by which there would be a required MW, anything more than $200,000 would require an MWA and would have to be brought back to the board, which is why this thing is being brought to you today. Anything beyond that, but below the level of the 300 and 400 kW, we haven't really discussed. We certainly could do that. We are aware that there is funding available this year, carryover funding from 2008 of about $2 million. So this money is available, and we're going to be able to open this up to more customers, hopefully many more smaller customers. This happens to be a large customer out there that has been apparently negotiating with our staff for some time.
I have a question. Is there anybody here in the audience from the Margulis family? Mr. Garber, when I saw the agenda item, I know that the gentleman listed under this Jules Ranch is Howard Margulis, and he is involved with Puerto del Mar, which is involved in the lawsuits on the QSA against the IID. And I just wanted to make the rest of the board aware of this. I know we're a public agency. Anybody has a right to request things from the IID, rebates or whatever. But I think that the IID on the water side has spent about $500,000 fighting Puerto del Mar in the lawsuits. And Mr. Margulis is coming to us to get $840,000 rebate on the solar project. So I think the board needs to be aware of that.
I did check that recently. Apparently, Mr. Margolis is a principal of Quattro Del Mar LLC, which is one of the more aggressive litigants in the QSA. And I didn't make the connection previously, but he is. He's a Nevada resident, and I guess he owns land in Imperial County, and for whatever reason has chosen to participate. So that is a correct statement.
Having just learned that, as you know, I have very strong feelings about working with folks that are suing the district on the following program. And now this has been brought to my attention. Legally, Mr. Garber, are we forced to accept this? Are there other applicants for these monies, Dr. Cloak?
We would have enough money in the 2009 budget and 2010, assuming that it's funded and the budget is approved, to satisfy all the applications that we currently know of.
Are the other applicants suing us as well?
The other applicants tend to be residential by and large.
And I would prefer to answer your question in closed session, ma'am.
Okay, then I would like to, this is for information only, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'd like to bring this back and discuss it in closed session.
Yes, ma'am. Are we talking today or the next closed session?
Next, on the 17th.
17th. bring it
Okay.
back.
Okay, Mr. Koch, you want to move on to number 4?
Yes, sir. This is information item is to inform the board that we are getting ready to sign a Western System Power Pool agreement with CFE. The newspaper article the other day was incorrect. We have not entered into a power purchase agreement with CFE.
You doubt the IV press?
In this specific instance, there was a little bit of ambiguity in the article. We have not entered into an agreement. We are entering into an enabling agreement that permits the district to buy energy from CFE. But because Mexico has slightly different rules than the other states that we tend to do business with, the WSPP agreement has been changed very slightly. There's 3 changes. One, it recognizes Mexican holidays when they don't coincide with U.S. holidays. Secondly, if there's a dispute, arbitration must take place in Mexicali. And third, arbitration would take place under the international rules of arbitration, although we tend to attempt to use the U.S. Jeff, it's the U.S. arbitration.
We typically use AAA, although we shy away from that these days. But American Arbitration Association.
The other thing that we've done on this is limited the transactions to no more than $2 million per month. The transaction amount would actually fall under the district's risk management policy, but it would be smaller than we would otherwise be doing.
Dr. Cloak, any of this, way, whether it have disputes arises, is there anything different, or is it unique, or is that how Canada would do something if we were trading, if we were real close to Canada? Do they have, we would run to international boundary jurisdiction or something?
I don't know about Canada. I assume that they would try to do it under the international laws of arbitration, but I don't know. Our outside attorney said that this would be consistent with the Canadian or any type of
It's a typical international style. So it's not particularly unusual. It's just something we wanted to point out from the board because it's not something we normally do. I do believe that the district entered into these types of transactions in the past, but I don't think the board was notified of the potential implications. So in the abundance of caution, we just want to make sure the board understands that if there's a dispute, we're going to have to hire specialized counsel and litigate it in Mexico.
And yeah, and if there's a dispute with the seller, it'll be litigated here in the U.S. So
Perhaps.
Dr. Cloak, are you comfortable with this document?
This is a very, we have enabling agreements or WSPP agreements with 2 or 3 dozen different entities. The WSPP agreement is a very robust contract that all Western entities use, and now is going nationwide, although for some reason they wanted to change it into the United States Power Pool, and FERC rejected their name change. So even though it's still the Western System Power Pool, the contract is being used across the United States right now. It's a very simple, easy way to do transactions, be them short-term or long-term, where the transaction is actually governed by the confirmation that the 2 parties enter into. So if one of our schedulers called up his counterparty at CFE, they would say, we want to purchase this amount. That confirmation then would govern the transaction under the rules of WSPP.
So you're comfortable with this?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Cloak, how much is, what, $2 million a month, how many megawatts is that roughly?
It depends on the price. If you had 1 megawatt at $50 for 744 hours, you're talking $50 per megawatt hour times for all hours of the month, you'd be at about 6 or 7 megawatts. If you move up to just on peak hours, then it would probably be close to about 20 megawatts during the on-peak period. And we currently have 71 megawatts of import capacity from Mexico.
When do you bring this back for approval?
Mr. Garber, I don't believe we need
You don't have
approval.
to, it's just information?
Only if the board requests it. It's sort of an information item. There were some, normally these are done without any discussion with the board because it's typical administrative function, but because this was a little bit unusual, we just want to let you know and make sure you're comfortable with the fact that in order to do with something that the board wanted us to do, we have to do something a little out of the ordinary. If the board wants us to bring it back for action, we can.
That's fine. I just wasn't sure of the procedure, but I think I support this because we're neighbors, and whatever we do to help one another and work with one another, I think it's great. So, yeah, I support this.
It's pretty consistent with terms that LADWP has with Mexico, isn't it?
I assume that they're operating under a WSPP agreement. I don't know if they have a separate letter agreement between the two parties. But I know they could be doing what they're doing under that agreement.
Dr. Koch, who in the IID staff helped work this up with the Mexican counterparts?
Noe Gutierrez, Art Magana, Carrie Downey, and I believe it was Vance Taylor.
And me.
And Jeff Garber. So we had 3 attorneys and two power people.
So you're still working with Ms. Downey?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a problem moving forward with it.
Just a question, if opportunity arises, you could go out, you would come to the board if outside of 2 million or something, if there were some opportunities, fantastic opportunities?
We would enter into the transactions under the normal risk policy that generally we don't bring back to the board. We'd be happy to inform you when we do a transaction with CFE.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Koch, you haven't been negotiating down in Cancun, have you?
No, sir, I have not. I haven't crossed the border yet.
Oh,
But that's a thought.
that is a thought.
Hey, when I go to Mexicali within the next few weeks to go buy the hojas and the chiles for the tamales, I'll take you with me.
These are passports.
I think I'll be busy that night.
El Paso. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. There's a correction on number 5 on the minutes, and then I'd like to pull number 6, just for discussion.
Okay,
Number, Gloria, on page 32, on the vote on the following, you got it listed as 3 to 1, but it was 3 to 2. Well, Stella and I voted no. And then I'd like to pull 6, and I'll second the motion on the rest. It'd be for 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and pull 6.
okay. Are there any other items that need to be pulled? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right, well, we'll move on down and pull number 6 now.
Okay, well, the only question I had on page 41 under threats, I know when we discussed them, I brought up the Imperial Group as being a threat, and I know Stella kind of agreed with that. If nobody wants to mention Imperial Group, at least should be mentioned in here somehow that some of our own landowners are a threat. I know up in their legal battles, they got disputes concerning conserved water, transfer water rights, apportionment, et cetera, but I don't know how you want to handle that, or I could see it didn't make it in.
Well, at the staff level, what we chose to recommend was the issues as opposed to the individuals. But it's certainly board's pleasure on.
Well, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. If they don't want to name the Imperial Group, that's fine, but I think that it's very obvious that we have our own landowners that we provide a service to are a threat to the water rights and to the IID itself. That's not any big
And-
secret.
And I agree with Director Menville.
I know it's only 4 board members here. But does this come back for a vote for action the next time? Is only information right now, right?
No, it's on consent.
So
Consent
it gets
agenda.
voted on now?
Or you
Yes.
can defer it until next time. I mean, it's your,
Well, let's just defer it till the next time on that item.
oh, is that the board's?
That's,
You need a motion for that?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Because we're going to end up with a split vote, probably, I'm guessing.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and defer, make a motion.
Yeah,
to
I'll
defer.
move that we defer number 6, ratifying changes to current IID strategy plan until the next meeting as an action item.
second your motion.
Okay, any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
We'll bring it back.
And did we vote on number 5?
Yeah, I included that in
Yeah.
Okay,
when you said, that was just that one change.
okay.
Okay, well then we will adjourn until the 5 o'clock workshop, public hearing.
Yes, sir.